So I'm Chris, and if you followed along, I'm the one that has found my birth family after 57 years, and I met them for the first time in June of 2017. And now the big question is, what's next? What is next? Certainly getting to know these people because I had full-blood siblings, both parents alive, but nearing 80 years old. And it fostered like, I want to spend more time there. I want to get to know these people and understand. A lot of it was just understanding myself at the same time, having grown up as an adoptee in a whole nother world for such a long time. So at the time of 2017, when I found them in June or May and June, um, work wasn't going that well for me. My wife and I had a neighbor issue where we lived, and I was on the West Coast, and all these people were in the Midwest. And my own sister that I was adopted with, grew up with, lived in Michigan, and my wife's sister, who had quite a few kids and a lot of family, were also in Michigan. So what we decided to do was seize the opportunity because my parents weren't getting any younger, these birth parents, and we flipped the script and we moved from the West Coast back to Michigan. And we did that by the fall of 2017. So within a few months, we had kind of all the issues surrounding our life at the time and the opportunity conspired to just say, let's just do it. So we moved to Michigan to be closer. And my wife is from California, so she was not on board with moving there permanently, more like a 5-year plan. So when we moved, the idea was this is for temporary to get to know everybody. And that's exactly what went on. So was able to find some work, spend a lot of weekends driving over. I grew up in the Chicago area, so got to go to old high school reunions and things like that. So it was just a blessing of an experience to be able to get to know my birth family members and spend more time with them. And every time I visited them, you would learn something new. You'd learn a little tidbit about how they perceive things, or you would tell stories about your own life and they were like an aha moment, like, wow, I can totally understand that. And it was back and forth like that every time I visited. And you can kind of get a sense for some of the joy of this experience with full-blood siblings. Like, this is a picture of me and my sister, and I can't smile any bigger than that. I was just loving every minute of getting to know these people. And also because my siblings have kids who were learning that, hey, I'm their new uncle. We had a lot of family get-togethers, and I'm getting to know them and all that stuff, and they're getting to know me. So we had some great little family get-togethers where I'm getting to know the daughters of my brother, who are big tennis players like I am, all that kind of thing. And at the same time with the birth parents, really getting time with both my birth mother and my birth father, because they were in their 80s, was really important. And so my birth father had some health issues, so I was worried about that. And that was one of the reasons to move back there. But while I was there, and they grew up, this is rural Wisconsin. And as I mentioned before, he grew up in a town called rural Wisconsin. And it's in a chain of lakes area where there were a lot of vacationers from the Chicago area. And so he got to meet people that way. And that plays into some of the future episode about the Chicago mob and some connections that came out of some of those relationships and opportunities that presented themselves in Northern Illinois. So we'll get into that. But I got to spend time with my birth father and meet some of his friends. And one of the fascinating things that I know I take for granted, because I've moved around the country, worked different areas, went off to college, been around quite a bit, is that some of these rural situations and people that might not have the upward mobility or go into the cities or whatever, they just have been there a long time. And one of the beauties of it that doesn't get understood enough is that when I went with my birth father to meet some of his friends at this bar in the morning for breakfast, so the bar's closed, he has this regular group and they meet in the morning, and we go in there, we're having coffee, donuts, and yucking it up about sports, whatever. But around the table, these were all people in their 80s now, some in their 90s, that he had been friends with for 70 years. These were 70-year friendships, and not just one, multiple around the table, 8 people around the table, grown up together, played softball together, done all sorts of things together. And here they were. And it was just stunning to see that type of thing. Getting time with my birth father turned out to be really important, more important than I realized at the time. We did get to walk around the property. There's a little picture of us with his trusty golf club hunting for golf balls that he hit on the hill behind the property. But got to spend some quality time with him. And that proved very important because not only did he get over his wondering about who I was and how I was coming into their dynamic of their life, and he was nervous about that at first, or a little standoffish, but we grew to have a really nice bond, really great bond. And his health started to fail later in 2019 and into 2020. And then in the spring of 2020, what happened? COVID-19. So I couldn't go over there as much with the lockdown, and he was having health problems. I don't know if it was COVID related, masking some cancer that had spread. I think that's the situation. But I got a call about, hey, you need to come over. So I was able to drive from Michigan the 7 or 8 hours over there, and he had been taken into hospice. And so it was a very stressful time for the family and for me too, because this was, I had already lost a set of parents. My adoptive parents had passed years earlier. Now I have another set that I have to go through this process with. But it was quite the weekend, the long weekend I was there, because my youngest brother said, well, he's been asking for you. And I can't think of a greater compliment to the relationship and the time we did spend together, even though it was only 2 or 3 years out of our entire lifespans. But to have that reconnection and have him feel that way about me and want to see me again before he passed. And so my brother and I, we went down to hospice and we spent time with him, and he got to see me and we got to communicate a little bit. He wasn't in the greatest shape. And then I was staying with my sister that weekend, and then he actually passed away the next day. So to be there for that, to have him wait in a sense for me to be there, and also to be there for my birth mother and just be able to comfort her through very difficult time after a nearly 60-year marriage, was just a great blessing through the whole thing. So this is one of the final or last photos of my birth father, and treasure the memories of spending time with him. And I guess all I can say is, as an adoptee, if you get the opportunity to spend time with siblings, whether they're half siblings or just one birth parent, or relations of some, that you learn through all this stuff, whether it's through your research, ancestry.com, whatever, it's like, seize the opportunity, because it can be a blessing to them. It can be a blessing to you and your own understanding of your own life. And just don't let that opportunity pass you by. So that's what I wanted to share today about the big change I made to make sure I got to know these people. And so hopefully you'll stick around for the next episodes. There's still more to come, and I'll see you next time.